you can check back in. We will have closed captioning, so as you speak, please enunciate clearly into the microphone so we can keep this meeting going. And if anybody ever needs any other accommodations, just let us know. You can email us, and Liz dropped the emails in the chat. But again, welcome to the Community Mobility Committee. And as a reminder, this is a place for residents and interested individuals to advocate for and learn about mobility and transportation issues in the city of St. Louis. So be respectful in conversations and questions. We are grateful that we have so many people here from the city, so we want to encourage everybody that wants to participate, and we want to respect their hard work and efforts, as well as everyone's opinions. If you speak today, please avoid using jargon and acronyms. If you are going to use some technical transportation terms, just define it, and we'll share a link in the chat if we can find it. Not all of our members are familiar with the technical language, so we want to make sure that this is a nice space for learning. Timing, please be mindful of time. We only have an hour today, so we are encouraging more follow-up outside of the meetings, both through notes and directly through questions. So if you have anything you want to mention or want to tap in about, put it in the chat or email us, and we'll make sure we follow up with you. Lastly, we are lucky to have the partnership with the city staff, the mayor's team, and a number of our alders in our efforts. So I'm going to ask each of the city representatives to give a quick introduction. And I'm going to popcorn it to Grace.
Was that popcorn or a drum roll? I couldn't tell. Well, hi everyone. So glad that we could all be together today. And today, Scott and I wanted to take the time to talk to you all what we're thinking so far on the mobility and transportation plan that passed in Board Bill 120. We are in the process of thinking through what that scope of work should look like. So we'd love to hear from you all on what you would want to hear. And I'm realizing as I'm talking and introducing what we're going to talk about, I already jumped ahead in the schedule in the agenda. I'm sorry, Christy. Grace County Mayor's Office, gonna pass to Scott. We're only doing introductions. I went 10 minutes ahead.
Thanks.
Scott Ogilvie, Planning and Urban Design Agency. Andrew.
Andrew, you're on mute.
Hello, I'm Andrew Lackey. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Office on the Disabled for the City of St. Louis.
And I saw that Alderwoman Schweitzer also joined. Alderman, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Alderwoman Schweitzer. It's my first meeting. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having it.
Welcome.
Great.
Anyone else? Nope.
Okay, thanks everyone. As Christy said, I'm Liz Kramer. I'm the co-chair. I'm going to drop our agenda for today's meeting in the chat. Likely you've received that via email, but if you haven't, you'll find it there. And then I will also drop the notes from the APO meeting. They are slightly updated from the version that was sent on Friday and Tuesday. A new version was sent this morning. So we have received answers from the Metro team and their consultants around the North-South Metrolink study. I'll pause for just a moment to see if there are any questions or comments regarding the notes before we move into the next section.
Liz, this is John Kohler with the Board of Public Service. I am on phone right now. I'll be joining computer in 1 minute.
Great. Thanks for introducing yourself, John. All right. I'll hand it back to Christy.
Thanks, Liz. All right, so rather than having a discussion about the issues raised, we want to invite our members of the committee or the public just to share some concerns, observations, and questions for up to 2 minutes. We will also share email comments we've received, but we will not ask for verbal responses or feedback to any of these comments. But that's what the chat is for. If you want to comment or chime in on it, use the chat function. But after the meeting, we will follow up with the appropriate individuals and share the responses in the meeting notes or invite the appropriate individual to give a response at the next meeting. So if anyone has any concerns, observations, or questions, please unmute yourselves and let us know.
Hey, this is Kaylina. I been on this committee for a while now, and I frankly have a hard time showing up every month because we're all living this every single day, the traffic violence that we experience. So I typically keep my video off, but I guess I kind of wanted to do like a generic, like, this shit's hard for all of us. Just since last we spoke, I've had probably 6 people get in minor bike accidents through potholes. And last Friday, I was leading a bicycle group. Oh, got an ambulance going by. And last Friday, I was leaving a bicycle group and had a city bus get pretty aggressive with me and my body and our group. And so I was thinking I could use my little corner of our sharing corner for 30 seconds with a moment of silence. I'm going to close my eyes and start a timer. It's only 30 seconds. It's going to feel long. Keep your cameras off, and then I'll stop us all together. Okay, let's do this. All right, thanks. I want to be cheerful. I know our leaders that are leading this group want to be cheerful too, and this stuff's hard. So let's remember we're all on the same team here. We're all trying to make improvements. We're all aware of how bad it is out there. Let's make it better. That's mine. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing that, Kaylina. Go ahead, Patrick.
So I just had a couple quick things. I'm still hoping to get a stance letter from the committee on MoDOT's recommendations to make it illegal for youth to ride bicycles without helmets. I asked for that at the last meeting. I'd really like to get a letter one way or the other about what your beliefs are on this. Since Grace is here, I'd love to have something from the mayor's office too on that as well. I think that you know, this is kind of a ridiculous request from MoDOT to you know, address traffic stuff by implementing laws on our youth, especially when they have no education or enforcement plans for those same kids. The other one I just wanted to point out, and I know a lot of people in the room know about it, but there is a unprecedented amount of federal funding coming down the pipeline towards us for bike and pedestrian opportunities. You know, we kind of missed the ball as a city on the last round, it sounds like, and so I'm really hoping that whoever's in charge of grant writing for the city can see some of these opportunities and make sure that we have some of this federal funding, you know, for all of these great projects that you guys are trying to accomplish. So, thanks.
Thanks, Patrick. Anyone else have any comments or questions, observations?
I had a funny to add too. I'll add it to the chat when I can find it again.
Okay.
I think Charles has
Charles?
his hand up.
Yeah, good afternoon. One of the things I've noticed is the group that is not really represented is the police department. And this will be especially important, not only as we talk about traffic violence, but I would strongly suggest the hands-free legislation, state legislation is going to be signed by the governor in August. And what that might mean for the police department in terms of hands-free and the issues related to it, both in the city and the county, but I know this is a city group, I think is going to be very important as we move forward. So I think developing a relationship or a stronger relationship with the police department so that when the hands-free legislation gets signed, we can begin to get some quality enforcement. And I would also say public education around what hands-free legislation means. So I just offer that as a way of looking forward in the future.
Lisa, did you have anything?
Yeah, I just was gonna say, I drive downtown every day after I drop my kid off at daycare to work. And oftentimes when I'm walking around at lunch, I have been a lot more nervous lately about walking and, feel that in my body and all of that. But when I was driving, and there's a conference in town right now, on Monday, I guess I was driving, and they actually had somebody, I don't know who it was like a tour guide. So I guess maybe it was the downtown district or something, but helping people cross near convention center, and just sort of a friendly person who had a stop sign and was like making sure people could cross safely in between some barriers. I'm not saying that this is the ideal model, but seeing somebody do that, having like a person there, really was something I was excited to see and wish I saw in more places more often. Again, not saying this is like the model or the best practices, but just saying, hey, that was nice. That's it.
Thank you, Charles and Lisa. Anyone else? All right, well, if there are no more comments, we will move into the next section to talk about
Hey, Christy, sorry, I
Yes.
couldn't get my my mic to work for a moment.
No worries.
Sorry, let me share my video. Hello, Michael Ridenauer. I wanted to see if there was maybe a renewed effort to incorporate some public utilities, particularly our gas utility, Spire. I know it's been mentioned a few times about the potholes and the construction and kind of the temporary steel plates that have been put along the roads and also the bike lanes. And maybe we could kind of form a similar partnership as our Kansas City counterparts to kind of incorporate and bring them in. I'm sure if we could get a dialogue going, we can at least get our concerns addressed. So I wanted to see maybe if there was renewed effort to try to establish a communication link.
Thanks, Mike. Please hold on to that thought, because later in our conversation, it may find a place there. So hold on to that. All right, if there are no more comments and things, I will move on to the long range plan. So East-West Gateway just released, I'm sharing in the chat, the draft of the long range plan. And so they are accepting comments on it. They want to know what you think. If you've read through it, great. If not, no worries. There is a document that you can read on the website. I'm putting it in the chat as well. And if you don't have time to read it, there's an audiobook. East-West Gateway has an audiobook. But a little bit of background about the long range plan. You can view it as the blueprint or the vision for the transportation future of the region. So all 8 counties, there's 4 in Missouri and 3 in Illinois. And not only does it outline the historical context of what's happened to bring us to the current situation in transportation. We look at what's actually happening today and what opportunities there are to improve, where we are strong at, and where we're that's a tongue twister, where we're weak. There we go. So after doing a deep dive through that, East West Gateway has an investment plan. And so the investment plan sets aside a budget. I would say a budget. There's not funding committed to it, but there's a budget for investment plans all the way until 2050. There's 3 different tiers, so some things may happen sooner than others, but the plan is over 20 to 30 years up to 2050. So if you have a chance, check it out, listen to the audiobook, and give your feedback. East West Gateway really wants to know what you think about this. I did drop the survey in the link, survey in the chat. So if you have read it, don't forget to give your input. Other than that, I'll send it over to Liz.
Great, thank you, Christy. So I'm going to hand it to Grace, who is going to give us some updates from the city.
Thanks, Liz. Hi, everyone. For those who were at the beginning of the call, just let me repeat myself. So Scott and I are here today to give a general update on the mobility and transportation plan. Of course, John and Andrew chime in whenever you'd like. We are going to, in June, give a better update on DB 120, the implementation, and more further details on that. So today we are asking if we can focus on the mobility plan specifically, because we are interested in hearing everyone's feedback after you all hear from us, kind of what we're thinking about in terms of the scope of work and the framework for that proposal that will go out. Will either be request for proposal, request for qualifications, RFP, RFQ for short. And on that note, I will turn it to Scott. I believe he has some PowerPoint slides that he would like to screen share.
Indeed. One sec. There. Can people see that? Great. So the citywide transportation and mobility plan funded one of the activities and projects funded through Board Bill 120. I think what I want to start with is just to say that this is really a new endeavor for the city. So we have not had kind of a modern citywide look at transportation and mobility that covers a broad array of topics. And so it's on the one hand, I think it's very exciting for us at the city level to be starting on this path. On the other hand, there's many things to work through. Because when you do something new, there's a lot of consensus building, I think, internally and with the public that needs to happen in a project like this. So we're getting started, but as Grace said, we are currently developing the scope of work, and we are now at a point where we're interested in the CMC and other people providing us input into what that scope of work should be. We think what we've identified so far covers a lot of ground, and I think it will cover a lot of things people are looking to see, but we'd also like to see what else people are interested in or what they want to make sure is included. Once we complete that development and review internally the scope of work, we'll select a consultant or a team of consultants through a competitive process later this year. And they will start work later in 2023. So we have been looking at a number of cities who have relatively recent and relevant citywide transportation and mobility plans. There are quite a few good ones out there that have been developed in the last few years, so we are not starting from scratch in terms of what these can look like. And some of the plans that we've taken a little bit closer look at Austin, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, some of the aspects of what Great Rivers Greenway does here in St. Louis, Washington, D.C., Seattle, and Kansas City, among others. And just some of these completed plans we've kind of picked out as providing a little bit of either inspiration or a good example to work from within some of the plan areas. So for instance, Washington, D.C.'s Vision Zero plan. On the right is Minneapolis's street typology guide, which kind of assigns the desired typology to all the streets within the network in Minneapolis. Austin has a very robust, wide-ranging strategic mobility plan that was completed 4 years ago that we've looked to, provides a lot of inspiration. Kansas City has done some, I think, very useful things in recent years, touching on particular utilities and completely changing the way they manage their sidewalk construction and maintenance program. They've made a big pivot, so that's something we're looking at. On the right, City of Sacramento has a very clear project prioritization process, which was interesting to look at. Helps communicate to the public the upcoming activities of what that city's doing and what the methodology is in selecting projects that are high priority. And GRG here in St. Louis has some really helpful guidelines they use internally that just kind of set the foundation for what Greenway should look like. So when they're doing a project, when they start a project, they've answered many of the basic questions about what the Greenway should look like. So they're not debating exactly how wide it should be, the materials, these types of things. They can kind of move, I think, more quickly into the more detailed design work that happens. So they have really nice visual guidelines that I think help communicate what their standards and kind of local best practices are. So what do we want to do with this plan? To me, a really key element that needs to be developed early on in the plan and then inform the rest of the plan is to develop through public engagement and through listening to people and synthesizing what people tell us, develop a consensus on the vision for mobility across St. Louis. So things that we think will emerge as we do public engagement are things like safety, things like accessibility, things like a system that's well maintained, and many other things. We think we'll hear those things, but we want to make sure that we are talking to residents and really documenting that, because we've never done that on a citywide basis before. And we want enough public input that we feel confident that these are the real desires of residents. And so we're taking actions based on those things. We feel like we will come, to the table with support from the get-go. We want to, well, we don't have a citywide transportation plan right now. We have many plans that touch on different transportation systems or a geographic specific. So for instance, North Side, South Side Metrolink, which we've been very engaged with right now, working on conceptual design and moving towards that project. We have an ADA transition plan that we're working from that BPS will soon adopt after a comment period. Great Rivers Greenway, of course, has a network of Greenway plans that we're working on in cooperation right now. So those things will form kind of a foundation or framework that we can build from. So we don't have to start from scratch, and we can fill in gaps that maybe some of those projects have not addressed. This is a little bit inside baseball-y, but one outcome of this process we'd like to have is we would like to have a transportation chapter of the city's comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan is something that the Planning Commission adopts, and we are simultaneously we are updating the city's strategic land use plan, expanding it, allowing it to cover More topics. That's a project that Miriam Keller in our office is leading. And this parallel process with the transportation mobility plan will allow us to add to that and have something that looks a lot more like a contemporary comprehensive plan than we have today in the city. And then the outcome there will be a lot of outcomes. I think it won't just be one outcome or one document in this plan. But I think a key thing is that we know and digest what the key themes and values are, the key values we want expressed in the transportation system. And we're more empowered then to act on those and do projects and have policy that supports those key themes and values. So the next few slides, I'm just sort of an outline of what we think the project looks like. And we're obviously reviewing a much more detailed scope of work in each of these categories right now across several departments. But this is where we would like input from the CMC to help flesh this out, look at areas that we could edit or improve or potentially something we've missed. So we hope, and Liz, maybe we should talk about a timeline for that feedback. We'd probably like it relatively soon. But we're interested to hear what everybody on the call has to say. So, number one, this sounds boring, but making sure we have a super clear understanding with our selected consultant team of what we really want out of the project and how we want to use it. Boring, but on a big project, you want everybody starting from the same place and understanding the goal they're working towards. The next topic is robust, equitable, citywide public engagement. As I said before, we want really a statistically relevant sample of what resident desires are, so that when we're taking actions, we know we are building projects and enacting policy that residents have told us they want and they support. I think a key element of this plan is what I'm calling a mobility story that tells a story about what we have, what we don't have, what we would like to see, maybe acknowledges some of the constraints in why we don't have some things and how it's hard to do certain projects or certain policies, but also just sort of makes this project interactive in a way and helps us communicate to more people in a more dynamic way and maintains resident interest in the project, and can also be used to inform residents on a lot of these topics who, maybe just are not engaged in these things the way everybody on this call is today. A really key element will be a safety action plan, often called a Vision Zero plan. I'm just using both terms right now, and I think we'll work through what we land on through the project. But the key element is really identifying where the high injury network is, what priority projects are to improve safety, and a more specifically expressed commitment to safety that comes with working on locations that are the most dangerous today, where there's the most injuries and fatalities. I think a street design guide, and this is similar to, I think, what GRG has done and what Minneapolis has done. Just some guidelines about, because not all streets are the same. Streets do perform different functions depending on their context and their adjacent land use. So I think having a foundation to work from of what the desirable street type is. It doesn't mean every street is going to change. Many of them are probably meeting those needs relatively well right now, but not all of them are. And we want to know the direction that different streets need to go in the future. Policy and ordinance review. So there's obviously tons of policies across different departments that touch on mobility or operations or maintenance or capital investments in some way. We want to look at all those, figure out what is working okay, what's not working okay. Ideally, we would like to implement some policy improvements as a part of the planning process rather than subsequent to the planning process. And we also have some ordinances that may be conflicting or maybe not really addressing the things they need to address in 2023. Mapping. So we have many maps, we produce many maps, but I would like to get those maps in a place where we can more easily communicate to the public what is out there today, what projects we are working on, what projects that are maybe not funded today, but are likely to, we're working towards funding in the future. I'd like it to be easier for us to tell the story about the work we're doing with taxpayer funding, what projects we're delivering on, and to have those projects be based on the methodology that is in another plan. So in this plan, in the high injury network, in an ADA transition plan, to really call out where we're taking action on plans that we have already adopted. Data standards and performance. These are things, there's oftentimes where I think we want to tell people what we're doing, but we don't necessarily have easy kind of data architecture internally to easily be able to tell people this is what we did last year. And I think people would love to hear, how many miles of sidewalks were replaced in 2022. And we can figure that out today. It's just a very labor intensive thing. So I want to have an architecture internally that allows us to report faster on key issues and have consensus internally on where we're going to be doing consistent reporting on different aspects of the mobility system. Looking ahead, you do a plan. You need to be thinking about what it takes to implement that plan. In the transportation realm, a lot of that is capital funding. So we want to be thinking about what the necessary amount of funding is in order to make progress on the plan. Obviously, more funding is always better, but obviously there are always constraints and competing priorities. But we want to have an idea of what the amount of funding we need as a city to maintain the system we have and make the improvements we would like to make. And finally, we're going to adopt the plan. We're going to add to the city's comprehensive plan. I think specific departments individually will adopt components of the plan. And we'd like to have a document that provides real guidance for the next couple decades. Pointing to Great Rivers Greenway again, they do this type of systematic planning locally, and they do carry out those plans. And I think it's extremely helpful for them for all the staff there to have an idea that they're implementing a plan, that there's a consistency to it, a degree of predictability, and that even if you're not working on a particular segment or project right now, you can still talk about that because it's still in the plan and it's something you will sort of get to eventually. So I will stop there. Grace, do you have any comments? And then happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I think this covers a lot of what we as a city have been talking about. And all I will add is a disclaimer. While this is everything, not everything, this is a high level of what we would like to include and see happen in this plan. There are things, of course, Scott already shared in the beginning that we couldn't list everything out because we wanted this to be a dialogue, but the disclaimer is really, we have a set number of funding, actually a lot of funding to put towards this plan. I believe it was 1.2 or 1.25 million. But as you can see, there is a lot of foundation, a lot of work that needs to be developed for us to be a city that standardizes this process, be a city that is looking at Vision Zero pedestrians and people who are biking, people who are utilizing the streets in many different ways, and we just don't have these frameworks. So while we would love to do everything, I just don't know what will actually happen in terms of what will land in the scope of work. For us to hear today, like what is super valuable from the CMC's perspective, that would help us in ensuring that that's not lost in this process. And Scott and I and John and Andrew and other folks can continue to talk about it as a city team of what we need to emphasize versus what's going to be a nice to have, but we want to know what the non-negotiables really are.
Thanks, Grace, and thanks, Scott. I want to just quickly pull out 2 questions from the chat. Scott, maybe you can just answer these about what you know right now, and then we can get into some discussion. The first one is how, if at all you've thought about this, will this overlay with the East-West Gateway Regional Safety Action Plan that was recently funded out of the Safe Streets for All funding?
Yeah, great question. So I would say, that plan is covering multiple counties. So that plan is going to be a little more general. It's clearly going to call out areas where there are existing safety concerns, and I think it's going to be highly focused on that. And those areas tend to be arterial roadways. I think it's great that we're going to have that as a focus with East-West Gateway. But what this planning effort for us will do is it'll allow us to go much deeper, I think, and with a much finer grain approach to policies, to communication, to things that we will produce in the future. So it's great to have that as a regional framework, but we're going to be able to be a lot more detailed in this plan, I think, compared to the East-West Gateway plan. But I also think that it's great to have them both. There's a little overlap in them, but I don't think that's a problem. And I'm very happy that a lot of jurisdictions are kind of moving in this direction simultaneously.
Thanks. Can you just quickly speak to what entity will be responsible for implementing community engagement efforts?
Yeah, so we'll lean heavily on the consultant to do that. I think that'll be a big part of the plan. So that's kind of why we hire consultants, because they specialize in areas. And I think, we will bring ideas to them. We will participate. They will largely be, I think, the boots on the ground and doing the community engagement, as well as developing compelling visual materials or, other, videos, those kinds of materials that will help us talk to the public and get people interested in the planning effort. I think there will be multiple departments who will continue to kind of help manage that consultant team. We really need input across a lot of city departments and a degree of ownership across a lot of city departments. So I view it all as a team effort, but I think on the front end of the community engagement, you often have your consultant team with a lot of input behind that from the city.
Great, thanks, Scott. We have a lot of questions in the chat, and I definitely would like to have all these questions answered, but I do want to also move us into a little bit of a discussion. So if you have questions specifically about the RFP process or kind of what the next steps are, we're going to try and come back to those at the end, or we'll ask Grace and Scott to give us a little bit more information following this meeting. So Christy, do you want to give a quick intro to our sort of discussion before we move into that?
You're muted.
Thanks, guys. So first off, thanks to Grace and Scott for that update about the plan. But to move the conversation forward, we've pulled together some things that we might want to see in the plan. Some of those things the team is definitely thinking about already, but some of the things we've requested in the past we would like to see happen in this plan. We got a little input from the subcommittee chairs to help think about what actually might be important. So Liz is going to drop a link in the chat. It's a mural board, and it's like a digital white space. You don't have to use it. We'll also screen share, but we want to start bringing in your ideas about what should be in the mobility plan, or what's really important, or what's less important to be included in the plan. You're welcome to add your thoughts to the chat. If you want to say something, you can unmute yourself, but let us know.
So I'm going to give just a quick overview. There's a lot of stuff on this board. We have it grouped into two categories. The green category is the plan, process, and approach, and the yellow category is the plan, content, and deliverables. And again, as Christy said, we've pulled many of these from our previous requests, and we also asked the subcommittee chairs to give some input from some of the discussions that they've had. So in plan, process, and approach, and I guess I should clarify, the blue Post-it notes that are at the bottom are the things folks have already dropped into the chat, started adding them in. So anything you put in the chat, we're going to consider as well. So in plan, process, and approach, we're thinking about things about like who is leading the plan? Do they have personal experience with biking and walking? Are resources allocated to connect with hard to reach people, including things like food or canvassing or childcare? Can the planning effort advance cultural change away from our auto-centric methods of thinking? Can engagement should focus on the people who are most vulnerable to traffic violence? And I've got two of those. There should be many different types and times of engagement. And the planning should be managed by a department that has the capacity and the ability to bring other departments together. So then moving over into the plan, content, and deliverables, we want to make sure that the data that we're seeing that Scott just talked about is showing both the overall trends and then also specific trends for racial and geographic inequities across a wide range of different data points that we know are important. We want to make sure that there is a system of collecting and analyzing data that allows the city and the public to track those long-term trends and hold ourselves accountable. We want there to be systems of accountability and the follow through of the plan and the maintenance across the city. As Scott mentioned, addressing maintenance is really important. We want the plan to include some near-term opportunities as well as midterm and long-term opportunities, some that might be a little bit more visionary. We also want to make sure that the plan is addressing topics beyond infrastructure into education enforcement, as well as changes to systems within the city. And we want to include things that are happening now with the funding currently available and sort of show how we're on that path to progress. As Scott mentioned, we want to see this plan align with accessibility needs and the ADA transition plan, as well as with the other kinds of planning efforts, maybe beyond the sort of set of transportation ones to align with the sustainability plan, which I believe is going to be updated soon, and some of the economic resilience work that's going on elsewhere in the city and the region. And then we also want to ensure that there's a robust system of oversight and governance. So these are some of the things that came up. I see folks are already adding things into the Miro board, but we also welcome comments in the chat, or if you want to unmute. I'm going to briefly talk about kind of what the process is. So in this session, we really want to hear from folks who are here. I think that will be really helpful for Grace and Scott. We're also going to send out a short survey following this meeting later this afternoon. So for folks who aren't able to attend, or if you need a little bit more time to sit with it, that'll be a way for you to provide some feedback on like which of these things are actually most important to us and what other things should we consider. And our intention is to submit a formal letter to the city with some of those highlighted priorities from the CMC, hopefully by early next week. Okay.
And Liz, I think one thing I didn't mention, the planning process, I don't know exactly how long it'll take, but probably in excess of a year potentially. And we consider CMC members to be key stakeholders in that process. So I think during the planning process, we would anticipate lots of places to engage with the plan for the CMC, and to provide input along the way as well.
So some folks who are raising questions in the chat, I suspect that some of these questions are things that Grace and Scott may not have answered yet. So if we have some strong perspectives, for example, Cheryl, I'm looking at your question about the process for citizen engagement and citizen advisory committees. If there are best practices that we want to ensure that we're asking for, or things that we think are particularly important. Matt, you asked what is the process or selection criteria for consultants? Things like that would be really helpful for us to know about.
Yeah, so the consultant selection criteria, there's that process is basically established by law. So we publish either an RFP or an RFQ that talks about what we're looking for, what the project is, what the scope is, what the budget is. That's up for a certain period of time. We get submissions from consultants or teams of consultants who are working together. And then those are reviewed internally by a selection committee that is established by ordinance. And then typically on a project of this scale, several top teams would be interviewed by that selection committee. They would, they'd give a presentation specific to the project, and then the teams are scored by the selection committee, and the highest scoring team enters contract negotiations.
Thanks, Scott. Scott, I'm going to ask another question from the chat. In terms of improving the data standards and performance indicators, is there an intention to hire new staff for this purpose, or is there an existing team that would be responsible for that?
I can take it, Scott, if you want me to.
Sure.
I think that there are multiple ways we could approach it. I know that this has been a concern of folks on the call on hiring more staff for that. So hiring more staff for addressing pedestrian, cycling, non-motorized use, just to be more specific. And so that is an option. There's also a data team that's being built out, and we have not had a chance to talk to that data team yet to see what capacity there in the future is. So I think this consultant or consulting team will have a lot of opportunity to help the city think through what the best way to staff that, if we need to hire additional staff, or if we have internal capacity that's already being staffed up, and seeing how that can be better coordinated amongst the different departments as well.
Thanks, Grace. I suspect that Zoom has changed its features. So folks keep direct messaging me comments that I think are meant for everybody. So I'm sorry if you keep doing that, because I think it's Zoom. So Rachel, Charles, I'm seeing some of your comments, your questions in here, and I am curious if they're, Rachel, for example, if that is a thing that you would like to see in the plan. Rachel asked if the firm can come up with an economic development toolkit on funding maintenance, such as TIF district, TDD, etc. I think right now we want to know what are the things that you would like to have included, knowing that Grace and Scott have not fully fleshed out what will be included at this point.
So sorry, was that a question, Liz?
No, it's a question to the folks in the chat, not to you, Grace. I will see if I can fix this Zoom feature in the future. Okay,
Liz, are you asking me to repeat my question or ask it generally?
Charles, less of a question. What I would like to know is, do you want there to be a specific amount of funding for community engagement and education to make sure that part of the process is not shorted? And if so, what is it that you're looking for?
Well, I'll do the back end of that first. What I'm looking for, so normally a lot of community engagement doesn't happen until a particular point in and after the institution is given a contract. And what I'd like to make sure of is, so then they have this 30% design guideline that they utilize, but because of the enormity of this project and who it will specifically or what specific areas it may generate need to have community engagement, I would like to make sure that the community engagement and education, because you have to educate before you engage. So the community education part and engagement part is substantially funded so that whoever comes on board knows that there's an obligation to do that, and therefore that funding and that support won't be restricted, as I've seen in other projects, both city, county, and state, where, well, we'll do 30% design and then we'll trout that out to the community. This is far too important to have that be the practice.
Yeah, so in this planning effort, we're not going to be designing specific projects at an engineering level, although we may be identifying desirable projects to pursue in the future. So I think the public engagement part here is intended to be early in the process so that the input that's gathered from residents and the key themes that we hear from them flow into the rest of the work, and some of the outcomes from the planning process address those things that we hear early on.
Thanks, Scott. That's much appreciated.
All right. Scott, can I ask, Scott and Grace, can I ask just one final question before we wrap this portion up? Aubrey asked if this is shared across departments, who will be accountable for making sure it is implemented? Is there anything you can speak to on that?
I'm not sure if that was related to the data comment I had made, Aubrey. I'll answer it both ways. The data comment is if the data team is the one to help support the departments, they would be the responsible I'm trying to say lead, I guess, but that's all to be figured out. I'm not saying that staff won't be hired at all for that. In terms of if that is a question more related to the plan, as you all know as well, a lot of our transportation infrastructure projects are between two departments, mostly that is streets and BPS. And then of course, planning plays a really large integral role on that. So the funding was allocated to the streets department, but we've been talking to Bethany as well in that Scott and planning is going to play a large integral role because this is a plan that's being pulled together. So it will be most likely Scott might be the one that we point folks to, and Scott will ensure the right department receives the questions, but not to put Scott on that, putting Scott in that place as well, because we will make sure there is a strong point person that folks know who to direct the plan questions towards, and it gets to the right departments and consultants whenever they're chosen. But Scott, would you give a different answer to that?
Well, in thinking about, plan implementation after the plan has ended, it's a slightly challenging question to answer because I don't think a plan completely reorganizes kind of the typical budgeting process that leads to project selection. But I think the plan can provide a lot of guidance into what those projects should be in the future. So even post-plan, there's still an element of, there's elected leadership, they play a key role. There's the annual budget, that plays a key role. And then project implementation is primarily a Board of Public. So, well, project implementation is primarily a Board of Public Service activity. But not all policy things are Board of Public Service activities. So some of those policy things may be very department specific, that other departments end up, implementing certain elements of the plan.
Great. Thank you both so much, and thanks everyone for all of the comments you've provided on this. We will, as they said, follow up with more information about what's coming next. And I'm just going to very quickly screen share our committee updates. We only have a few minutes. And just to let you know that the engagement committee will meet again on June 21st, and the Safe Streets Committee will meet again on June 26th. So if you would like to join either of those committees, please please email Dawn or Rachel. And then as a reminder, if you are new to the CMC and you want to get our emails and be up to date on what's happening, you can join the Google group at the link there. That's our primary communication channel. So our next meeting is June 28th, 2 days after the Safe Streets meeting. We will see you here for updates about the rest of the Board Bill 120 efforts, and we'll look forward to hearing more. And please do either email me and Christy or complete the survey that you'll receive later this afternoon if you have additional feedback. Jen is also saying there's a MoDOT open house tonight to talk about closing the on-ramp from Cherokee to southbound I-55. So check that out. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we're really grateful for your time and input.